Guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is October 10th, 2023. And let's get to the news happening in Ukraine and the world, shall we? First, I'll talk a little bit about Ukraine and the situation, and also I'll have a few comments about the Israel tragedies that have been ongoing the last few days. So, let's head into Ukraine first. I have a few things to cover the last few days. There's been some developments throughout the front line again, not surprising. So, one, today, there is a major Russian offensive going on right now in the area of Avdiivka. So that is close to Donetsk, Upitne. I've mentioned a week or so ago that the Ukrainians regained initiative there. They've gotten some ground close to Upitne, but the Russians now are deciding to conduct an offensive of their own. And so far, according to preliminary field reports, they're being unsuccessful. They have launched a really big attack. It's unusual based on just the amount of size that they've committed to this attack. So according to these reports, they've lost already 15 tanks, 30 BMPs, 120 dead orcs, and about 140 of them wounded. And they've also managed to lose an Su-25 jet today. So the Russians have committed a lot of resources. I've actually seen also them using the Mi-28 helicopter and different types of helicopters in this offensive. But so far, it's not working out for them. Again, don't underestimate the Russians. They will continue throwing meat after meat until they reach some sort of success in their attempts at taking villages, cities, and just basic territories. So again, this is just another attempt for Russia to distract the Ukrainian forces in the south. They're trying to basically force the Ukrainians to move a lot of their reserves currently in the south to the east, making them weaker in the south and not being able to conduct the current offensives. Again, based on the temperature, Ukraine has about a month and a half left. Middle of November, the temperature is going to go really cold and it's going to be much more difficult to advance quicker. So they're trying to distract the Ukrainians, make them lose the momentum, and do an offensive of their own. So far, it's not been successful. We'll see how it develops. Second of all, the Ukrainian forces hit a Russian supply train in Tokmak, another huge loss. The Russians deeply, deeply rely on Tokmak, one of the largest cities close to the Surovikin line, to resupply its forces and continuously throw their meat in the south of Zaporizhia, where the Ukrainians are fighting, especially around Orikhiv. So this is a huge loss for Russia. Again, this means that it's going to take them weeks, maybe even months, to repair these railway lines and being able to continuously supply their troops with medication, fuel, food, just basic things that you need to run an army and, even defend yourself or even run an offensive. The Russians are degrading more and more in terms of being able to resupply themselves. And three, along the same thrust of the offensive in Orikhiv, the Ukrainians have kind of shifted their focus away from Novoprokopivka, and now they're pushing more towards Verbove, and that has been confirmed by a lot of sources, indicating that the Ukrainian forces are pressuring more the Russian defenses closer to Verbove. And the last thing is that also the Institute for the Study of War mentions that Putin might go after the Baltics soon. And so, again, I'm taking this with a grain of salt, just mainly due to the fact that we've heard a lot of different reports in the last few since this conflict started, but especially in the last few months, that Russia is going to invade Ukraine again from Belarus, or Russia is going to do this and that, going to invade Finland. And none of that happened. And I think that we need to be careful. We need to be mindful of these reports and not take them for granted. As we've seen the last few days, Israel and Hamas, that was something that was unexpected. So we, I think, need to be aware of these threats. But I seriously doubt that Putin is going to do something like that. Apart from maybe the fact that he feels like he needs to raise the stakes and have a direct conflict with NATO to really convince the Russians that it's not just a Ukrainian question, but it's really, truly, and visibly us versus the West question, right? So we'll see, but I seriously doubt Putin, since this conflict started, has been very careful. And, many of us say he was irrational obviously with this major invasion that he did, that was not a smart decision, but he's conducted himself very carefully, right? Trying to avoid as much as possible a direct confrontation with NATO. He's been testing a little bit here and there, sending missiles perhaps in Romania's way or in Poland's way, trying to see how the reaction is, even downing American drones in the Black Sea, because he wants to see what the reaction is. And unfortunately, it has been very unreactive to that. And I understand because Russia is a nuclear power, but I seriously doubt that if he decides to directly invade the Baltics, that's a statement that NATO is going to, in my opinion, there's no way that NATO is going to sit idly and say, we're not going to do anything. They're definitely going to respond. So that's why I think that's not going to happen. But everything is possible. People said that Russia would never invade Ukraine, and here we are over a year and a half later talking about this brutal invasion. So that's the situation overall in Ukraine. A lot of things have been developing, but so far the situation is stable on Ukrainian side. They're capable of holding the line. If we look on the map, they're capable of holding the line in the east. Again, the Russians are really betting a lot in their offensive in the east, especially in the north between Svatove and Liman. So far, again, nothing's really changed in the last few months, right? This is Russia's answer to Ukraine's southern offensive, but they haven't been able to really move the front line here, which is really good for the Ukrainians, especially when we consider how close the Russian troops are to Russia. For them, it's extremely easy to move logistics, troops, weapons from Russia, literally, 20, 25 kilometers away around the Kupiansk area. And especially in Luhansk, where their logistics are some of the strongest, right? This is where Ukraine didn't have the best defenses, and that's how Russia was able to really sweep through in spring and June of last year, in the summer of last year, through Luhansk so easily. So this is some of their strongest positions. So it makes sense for them to do an offensive here, but they have not been successful at really pushing out the Ukrainians away from the general front line that has been existing for the last few months already. Now, as I've mentioned, Avdiivka, this is where the Russians have started another offensive today, a big one. There's a funny video of them trying to cross a small little body of water somewhere around Vodyane. There was a small pontoon bridge here, and one of the very first leading BMPs fell in the water. So that is pretty much a summary of how their invasion is ongoing. And again, as I've mentioned, when we're looking at the south, so the Orikhiv axis, less of a focus has been put into the Novoprokopivka attack and more towards Verbove. So Ukrainians right now are somewhere in the middle of the Surovikin line, a very dense network of trenches, mines, difficult to break through. But the Ukrainians, if we look at it in this axis, they're about halfway through, just a little bit less than halfway, but it's going to take some time to break through here. So we're still going to be talking about the Ukrainian offensive very likely in 2024 in this area. Also, the Ukrainians are trying to consolidate and defend positions in their flanks. So Kopani, there's been a lot of fighting ongoing here as well. And lastly is that the Russians as well and the Ukrainians are fighting a lot along the Polohe area. There's some reports that the Russians actually, if you look at the map, you can see that they've moved a little bit here around the Marfopil-Stepanivka area. Very negligible gains, but still, these are movements from the Russian side towards Chervone. So that's about the only change that has occurred in this area. And the Staromayorske Zavitne Bajanya front line has unfortunately been very steady. Nothing has really changed here in the last few weeks, as you can see. So the Ukrainians have really prioritized their offensive in Orikhiv at this point. So that's it for the map. Let's go back into the slides because there's a few other things to discuss. Israel and Hamas. So this is a really big development in the last few days, and a lot of the focus has shifted to this conflict. I, first of all, condemn what Hamas is doing in Israel. It's absolutely barbaric, and it's equivalent to what we've seen the Russians do in Kherson, Irpin, Bucha, the same barbaric behavior. It's immoral. There's no morality within Hamas, and I condemn anyone that is supporting these actions against Israel. That's my position, and I fully agree with what Israel is doing, securing their border towns and making sure that they completely annihilate any threat And that means annihilating Hamas within Gaza if necessary, and other parts, whether it be even in Lebanon with Hezbollah. I fully support what Israel is doing right now. However, there's the elephant of the room. We often talk about, obviously Hamas was not able to conduct this operation by themselves because we've seen how really well coordinated they were. They did an attack by sea, by land, and by air. They were using paragliding, engines and vehicles to fly in the air and then, enter some of these villages and cities in Israel. They also were able to conduct attacks by the sea, right, using a lot of their ships to go to Ashkelon, one of the largest cities close to Gaza, and Sderot as well. By air, they were using drones that seem to be manufactured by not only Iran, but also grenades manufactured in Russia. And so this obviously begs the question, if it wasn't just Hamas, who it was? Obviously, we know that Iran is a huge backer of Hamas, but it's also, and I would not be surprised, could be wrong, but Russia could also be behind this. Let's remember that a few weeks, if not months ago, Lavrov met with one of the Hamas, leadership. Coincidence? I don't know, but it seems like it would be in Russia's interest to destabilize this region further and distract. Again, you see the common theme is distracting the world from the Ukrainian conflict. Although this is also a very important conflict as well that hasn't been resolved, unfortunately. But again, I see this very Israel being very careful, right? They have, of course, mentioned that Iran is behind this and Hezbollah, and they've also started targeting parts of southern Lebanon. But nothing's been mentioned about Russia and the possible Russian involvement. Again, we need proof, but I would not be surprised. There's so much proof already of, Russian, cooperation with Hamas. Drones dropping Russian grenades, even Wagner possibly training Hamas a few months ago and, preparing them for this attack. There's a lot of leads that point into the fact that Russia was also behind this. And I fear that Israel is not going to say anything, even if they have a solid proof that Russia was also behind this, because obviously there's a large Russian population, Russian Jewish population in Israel. Israel is also, very careful in terms of dealing with a nuclear nation like Russia. So again, there's still a tolerance for terrorism within the West, in my opinion. But apart from that, I have full confidence that Israel is going to be able to take back. They've already taken back most of these occupied villages close to Gaza, and now they're just destroying, very large and big headquarters of Hamas. So, I have no doubt that Israel will be able to regain the initiative and deal with this threat once and for all. Another terrorist attack happened today, and that is between Finland and Estonia. So there's the Baltic Connector, which is a gas pipeline and also telecommunication line that connects both Finland and Estonia. And surprisingly, it blew up. Norway actually confirmed that they registered a sort of explosion in this area, and that coincided with this Baltic Connector being completely destroyed and no more gas, connecting or traveling between both nations. And who wants to bet that Russia was behind this? I mean, we've seen the same situation happen a little bit over a year ago with Nord Stream. And this seems to be very likely to be another terrorist attack from Russia. And again, in my opinion, there's no denying behind this. Terrorist states need to be destroyed, whether it be Hamas or the Russian regime. They're exactly the same. They operate the same. They will continue to disrupt, commit terrorist attacks throughout the world, poison dissidents, poison critics, and we cannot allow them to continue this. And this is why it's really important to have a very strong response and providing Ukraine weapons as much as they can, providing the Ukrainians everything they're asking for. It's the best return on your investment for global stability and peace. And lastly, speaking of great investments, Germany did another great investment. So thank you to the German people and the German government. A great defensive package from Germany for this winter. It's this winter package, Essential for Defense. As you can see, It will contain Patriots and IRST systems. So the Patriot system all obviously includes the command unit, radar unit, 8 launchers, and 60 missiles. So I believe it's only one, if I understand correctly, and one IRST SLM, which obviously is followed with everything that supports the system. And an undisclosed number of missiles. The IRST has proven itself to be one of the best systems against Russian missiles, and the Patriots as well have been very reliable at shutting down these constant waves of Russian missile attacks against innocent Ukrainian targets, like the one we saw last week with them killing over 55 innocent civilians in Hroza, Kharkiv. A true Russian terrorist attack, right? And these are the systems that Ukraine needs to continuously defend themselves from what will continue to happen. The Russians will not stop, and they will continue cheering the deaths of Ukraine, just as Hamas and the supporters of Hamas are cheering the deaths of hundreds of innocent Israeli people. And you guys have heard the stories, the gruesome stories of them even beheading and killing babies and children. It's unacceptable, and we need to annihilate these types of threats throughout the world. We cannot allow terrorism to reign our planet. And so thank you to the Germans for this great assistance. Apart from these IRST and Patriot systems, Ukraine is also going to get the Gepards. They're great against the Shahed drones, the Iranian drones. They also will send 10 Leopard 1A5s. So these are the older version of the Leopard 1, obviously the modernized, but this is the Leopard 1 still. It's not the Leopard 2, but still good nonetheless. The Ukrainians will definitely find great use for this system, for this tank. 15 APCs, they were not mentioned, 20 armored medical vehicles, and lastly, 155 millimeter ammunition, always necessary. Ukraine is utilizing that every single day. So a huge thank you to Germany. Thank you to you guys. Thank you for supporting this channel, and thank you for supporting Ukraine. Let me know what you think about the Israel Hamas conflict. By default, I really believe that Russia and Iran were behind this. Iran, it's not a surprise, but I think that Russia also has played a vital part in influencing the attacks of a few days ago in Israel. So thank you so much. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!